Cristina Jimenez, you are an unbelievable woman. You've really changed my life. You've made me see the world in a different way. Not often do you meet people that change your worldview. And I've always been in love ever since you invited me to El Congreso
Oh my God,
of
yes.
United We Dream. And I felt, for the first time in my life, I felt like, oh my God, these people are the real patriots in this country. So let's start by saying, can you tell us who you are? What is it that you do? Explain to the audience what you do.
Sure, and it's so wonderful to be here with you, Nelly. You changed my life too, and I love that we're having this conversation. We connected because of dreams and aspirations that immigrants and just, families have always for their lives. And I know that you connect to this as well. I mean, my family came from Ecuador in 1998. I was born in Ecuador. And I never would have thought that coming here, seeking a better life, and my parents making very difficult choices and sacrificing so much will lead to me leading a movement and creating with other young people who share the same experience a national network that now is in over 28 states with close to 500,000 members.
Wow.
Across the country. And United We Dream, exactly that's that, right? It's a space for young people to come together, to build community, to dream together about the lives that we want to have for our communities, our own lives, and to find our voice. Because so many of us are also growing up so afraid of many things, afraid that we will be deported, afraid that we would be kicked out of this country, and ashamed because of our accents, ashamed because of the color of our skin, ashamed because we don't see ourselves in books, in movies. So United We Dream is this magical space where we get to be ourselves, our true authentic selves, and find our voices to bring change to our communities. And I've been in the work of empowering young people and communities for over a decade now.
You're now the director. I mean, you're running this organization and this movement. But I think that the story is very beautiful because it really begins with a lot of young people in a lot of cities and states in this country that came together, united in a pain. Yes. United in pain.
As you say in your book.
Right.
And it becomes your greatest strength.
It becomes your greatest strength. So let's start with, how did this over a decade ago, something happened that brought together a number of young people, one of them being your husband. How did that happen? Talk about the man that started it all in Washington, D.C.
Oh, absolutely. I'm so happy to share also because it's amazing that this October of 2018, we also turned 10 years old as an organization. For me, it starts from a place of self first. I was coming from a family that have overcome poverty, homelessness, who, both of my parents were looking for jobs for multiple months in Ecuador and couldn't find them. And so they leave everything behind, risk everything to come here to make sure that my brother and I could be the first ones in our family to go to college. So I know that my parents, at a very young age, they're making a sacrifice for me. So I am already in this country thinking, I need to do this for them.
Of course.
Because they're sacrificing so much for me. And now growing up here, very quickly I realized that because of how I look, because of my accent, because I'm an immigrant, because I'm undocumented too with my family, I am treated differently in different places, right? In school, I get my teachers asking me if I have a social security number when I want to apply for college. My parents are afraid to go to the doctor because they don't have papers. And you always live with the fear that the police or an ICE agent will separate you from your family and deport you. And then your dreams are over and the sacrifices are all gone. So growing up that way, it was a lot of responsibility. So I always felt that I needed to do everything that I could to make sure that I was a strong candidate to go to college and that my family didn't have to continue to live in fear. And, I didn't know what advocacy was or getting involved in,
if anything,
in taking
you're low
action.
key when you live that life.
Absolutely. I was
You're
very
under the radar.
afraid. I was very afraid. And it was a moment where my dad was working at a car wash as an undocumented worker. And he had not been paid for weeks. And he calls me up and says, I need your help. Can you come and talk to this gringo, who was actually really an Italian American who owned the car wash, and ask him so that we can get paid? And as the only person that speaks English at this point in my household, like fluently, I'm 14, Nelly, and I show up to this car wash in Queens, New York, and I am talking to the owner and saying, you have all these workers, including my dad, who are working and you're not paying them. And he said to me, if they don't like it, they can leave. And I felt such a deep sense of powerlessness, because as an undocumented family, what was I supposed to do? Called the labor department, asked for help? Absolutely not. And so I started to feel a fire in me about, this is not fair.
This is not right.
This is not right. It's unjust. And there must be a way to do something about it. And the moment that propelled me to actually take action was when this hit my life, in addition to having to see my dad going through that. When a college advisor says to me, you can't go to college because you don't have papers, you don't have a social security number, and you don't have a green card. And it didn't matter all the work that I had done to have, my grades be really good and my community service. And, for many people, you know what I'm talking about. You get involved. You're trying to be a strong candidate to go to college. I had done everything my teachers told me to do. But because of my immigration status, she breaks the news to me that I can't go. And then I remember she just asked me to walk out of her office, and she called on the next student online, because we have been waiting 45 minutes to see her. And I remember going back home crying and sharing with my mom the news and saying, I'm sorry, but our dreams are not going to become true anymore. I can't go to college. I just been told that I can't because of my immigration status. And I will be forever thankful to my mother, because it was her courage that moved me to go back to the school and seek out for help. Because what she tells me is, Cristina, you cannot give up right now. We have sacrificed so much for us to be in this country, for you to be the first one to go to college. Because in my mom's family, they actually believe that women shouldn't go to college. Her dream was to become a teacher, and she couldn't do that. So she was very focused on making sure that I did. So this is the choice that she gave me as a teenager. You go back to school and you find out a way, you find another person to help you, or I'm gonna go there myself. And I'm gonna fight with whoever I have to fight, but you're gonna go to college.
Wow.
So as a teenager, I'm like, oh, I don't want you to embarrass me, Mom. Please don't go. And I filled myself with courage, and I went back and I asked for help. And thankfully there was a teacher that was able to help me. But it was in that moment where I realized I must do something now. So when I say that it became about survival, is because I realized that being undocumented and being alone and living in this deep fear all the time was not a way of living. And that I needed to do something so that I could survive and that my family could too. And this is how I end up meeting other people in New York City that were advocating for the state to pass what we called our in-state tuition bills. And that sparks to me some hope, because then I think, if there are students that are doing this, then I must be able to do something for us and for many others. And that became the beginning of a journey. By meeting many of them in New York, I get to hear of Josh Bernstein.
Oh my God, I love Josh Bernstein.
I love him too.
Someday there will be a monument to Josh Bernstein. Tell the Josh Bernstein story.
And Josh Bernstein at the time is an immigration lawyer that works in a national organization called the National Immigration Law Center that is based in Washington, D.C. And this man had been moved and touched by the story of a young woman, just like me, who wanted to pursue higher education but couldn't because of her immigration status in California. And that had sparked in him a vision that this needed to change. So she writes a bill which becomes the DREAM Act, and it's introduced in Congress in 2001, so that young people like myself who grew up here, who want to pursue higher education and honestly just want to stop living in fear of being deported, could have a way out and could have protection from deportation and be able to apply for citizenship. And we get on the phone with Josh Bernstein, and by now I meet Walter as well. Walter Barrientos,
your husband now, but
back then was a
friend.
friend.
He was you. He had similar issues.
A friend, and who now is my husband. And the reason how or why we connected so quickly with Walter, it was because he was the first undocumented young person that I met who told me all the tricks of survival, because he had a cell phone, he had business cards, he had found a job somehow. And I'm thinking, Walter, you and I are undocumented. You need to tell me, how do I get a cell phone if I don't have a social security number? How do I find a job? And he was like, let me tell you. And he started helping me so much. But he was like the first person that I met who the fear had not stopped him from seeking ways to make it work and to be unafraid about who you were. So that moment or that experience with him was very inspiring, and what kept our friendship for a long time before we became a couple for many years.
And so let's talk a little bit about how Josh helped you all cultivate your voice, because I think that's important.
Josh played a pivotal role in helping us find comfort in our own stories, but also find the courage to share the stories, because it became more than myself, right? And this is where the self gets transformed into a we. Because Josh is reaching out to young people like me, like Walter, all across the country, and he's saying, if you come to Washington and help us advocate for this DREAM Act bill, and you share your story with members of Congress and with reporters, you're going to help us create momentum and support for this piece of legislation. So for us, it was about our lives.
But it was also scary because you're outing yourself.
And it was so scary. But here's the thing. When it became about more than yourself, and I knew that by sharing my story, I was going to help others in my situation, it's what helped me bridge the gap between the courage and the fear that you have.
When you find something greater than yourself,
absolutely, then
you can bridge the gap between that fear and that possibility.
Yes.
And the action.
And taking action, because I knew that by sharing my story, I was going to advocate for a solution that was going to help me, my brother, my cousin, my friends, and all of these young people that I had already met, Walter, many others across the country. And so for me, Josh's main role in bringing us together and then, taking us to Washington, D.C., not a lot of people know this part of the story. We had so much fear that something will happen to us by coming out, by traveling to D.C. from different parts of the country, that Josh kept a list of numbers and states instead of our names. So we didn't have a record of the names of the young people who were undocumented that were coming out and sharing their stories and saying, I'm undocumented and I'm unafraid, and this is my story, and this is why we need the DREAM Act as a solution.
He was bringing you guys to Washington. And I think so many people of color, not just Latinos, have no clue that whatever, we're living lives that without something happening in Washington, without legislation, without real paperwork, that changes things, nothing changes. Without a relationship with your congressperson, kind of how the system works.
Yeah.
I mean, when you and I've talked about this a lot, when you're undocumented, you live in a cash society, right? You're not using credit cards. You're living in cash. You're not engaging the system. And for you all to get involved in the politics and really advocate for yourselves is even a whole other quantum leap, which is even understanding how the system works to change anything and how long it takes. So can you talk a little bit about sort of your awakening around that?
Oh, absolutely. And a lot of it is also, Josh and many other organizations that have been doing advocacy in Washington, D.C. and in other places. And so I remember my first trip to Washington and meeting with a member of Congress. We've met with Senator Kennedy at the time when he was alive. We met with Senator Obama when he was a senator. And we share our stories. And I will ask Josh and say, what happens next? I came all the way from New York to Washington, D.C. I'm sharing my story. What happens next? And so I became an expert at how democracy in this country works through this experience. Because then Josh and others will break it down for me. Well, this member of Congress gets into office because people in their districts and in their states are voting for them to be in office. And even if you're a person that doesn't have papers, this person represents you in Congress. So you do have the authority to sit in front of them and to say, this is my story. You represent me. I remember meeting with Senator Clinton and sharing my story with her. And Walter shared his story as well. And say, as a senator of New York, this is what we need you to do. And so
what you're saying is, I don't, and I really want our ladies to hear this, that as a citizen of a country, you need to infiltrate the system. You need to understand and not feel like those people are better than you, that you have the right to sit in their presence, that you own them.
These people are working for you. They're working for you. But you see, this is a challenge that we have also in the education system, right, Nelly? In school, nobody told me that. Nobody told me that. I mean, I learned about elections and the importance of voting, but I did not learn to feel a sense of ownership of our democracy, of our government, and of our country. And it was through this process that I started to feel that. And so sometimes we see them as very powerful people that we are afraid of, that we may be intimidated around. But in reality, they're there because of you. They're there to work for you, to work for what you need in your community. And when you realize that, it is a completely change of power. Because then all of a sudden, now, I can say, I'm talking to voters in your district. And if you're not working for your community, the community will hold you accountable on that. And guess what? You may not be able to keep your seat in Congress. And that's not something I learned in school. It's something that I learned through doing this work and meeting with many members of Congress and little by little building that confidence in yourself and that sense of ownership and power, that regardless of my immigration status, my voice matters.
And that they need
story
you.
Matters.
That they need you.
And that they needed us.
It's the same thing that I talk about with the economic empowerment part too, that we don't use these assets that are there for us. Now, there's another part of the story that I think is very important, which is when Josh started working with you, he also really said to you, there are organizations in Washington that are going to train you in advocacy, how to be an advocate. Again, I think people think that to be a sophisticated person that's running a nonprofit that's a national movement, that you're winging it. You're not winging it. There is training to be done.
Yes.
When you see the NAACP, when you see La Raza, when you see organizations that are, very, that have been around for a long time, there is training to be done. And for me, it was shocking to go to your Congreso, right?
Yes.
To go to your convention and see that it was very sophisticated, that the wording was very sophisticated, that the way that these young people that were dreamers were more empowered than any of the people I see in high school. And I remember talking to you about it and you said, and Walter also said to me, we've been trained in advocacy, in So can you talk about that? We don't
Absolutely.
even know the rights that our own government has organizations that have money to train us.
I mean, we've been training organizing, community organizing, and advocacy. So when we, have various trips to DC, and these also happen outside of Washington D.C., thankfully there were what I would call organizations that have been established for many years that know how to do this or have been doing it for many years, and they provided a lot of the foundational infrastructure training. So my first training on communications, my first training on how to lead an advocacy visit, my first training on how to organize and what does organizing mean. And I didn't know I was a natural organizer already, but when I was going through the training, I'm like, oh, I've been organizing my entire life, which is bringing communities together, your friends together to take action so that you can get what you need for your community, right? And I've been doing this almost all my life. But through the training, I start seeing myself, I start realizing this. And I will say one thing, the organizations provided training, and then young people innovate. And they bring ideas. And they bring questions of why. Who says that we cannot do X, Y, and Z? So for example, in our movement, in our organization, when we started, we were doing the advocacy visits, sharing our stories, doing marches, doing vigils, and then there were a group of young people that said, we are willing to put our bodies on the line and risk civil disobedience if this conversation and this bill does not move forward in Congress. And a lot of perhaps the older, more established organizations feel very nervous about strategies or tactics like that. But young people innovated the movement work and the community work because they said, why not? Who says so? And if this is about our lives, we are going to do it. And even the sharing of our stories. It was a handful of us that started sharing our stories of undocumented and unafraid, right, for the first time. And then technology, social media, makes it so that it becomes a viral thing. Where you had young people in Tennessee, in Idaho. I had never met young people in those states, but they were sharing their stories as well. So it's the rich combination of what we are learning from our ancestors, from the people that have been doing it before us, and also the innovation and the new ideas and the dreams that young people bring that I think makes our work and made our work over the time really sophisticated, more impactful. And today we use all of those tools to continue to advocate for our communities.
So at this point, you're a handful of young people. So some of you are in college and this is like your passion, right? And you're getting into good schools. And all of a sudden, there's a point where you realize this has to be an organization. How does that happen? And then how do each of you, tough decision, decide, I have to go make money for my parents, I've got to figure out how to get a job, or I'm going to stay and work in this organization. So tell us that trajectory.
Well, what's happening at the moment is that we had a lot of different congressional cycles. So every year a Congress starts in January, they close the session in December. And so through January and December, there are many breaks, but there's also weeks where there's a lot of business getting done. And throughout that calendar year, we were always pushing so that Congress will move on giving us a solution and protect young people from deportation, protect our families from deportation when we were talking about broader immigration reforms, in addition to the DREAM Act. And what I started realizing with other people was that every congressional cycle, we had people that joined us, and the session will close, the bill never pass or never move from a committee in Congress, because they have different committees to discuss different topics. And then people will get very disappointed, hopeless to some extent, and they will leave. And we sometimes never saw them again. So we said, there's something here. We can't be building momentum and bringing people in, and then Congress closes session, and then they go. And we don't have a way to keep each other connected, to support each other, and to continue to grow the number of people that are joining our effort. So this is how the idea of building a space, we didn't know it would be called what it was called. We didn't know that it would be a national network, but we said we need a space so that other young people like us don't have to go through the hell that we went through, and they can have support, and they can have a place where they can find their voice and fight for change with us. And the other more like, political or a strategy reason I will say is that there were different opinions on how to get this done in Congress. So established organizations had a different opinion about how to do it. We had a different opinion on how to do it. And the different strategies will sometimes come into tension. So we said, we want a place of our own where we can be the strategist, where we can be the campaign managers, where we can be the ones leading in these meetings, and we can empower others to do the same. So it became really critical for this to be led by people who in their bones were feeling the pain, the despair, and the urgency of living in this country undocumented. And that became a central value of our DNA as an organization. So this is how we said, let's start a national network where all the young people that identify with our story and with the vision of ensuring that our families can live without fear and thrive in this country can join us. So while we are in college, and I remember going to school for policy analysis, and at the same time, on my side time, I'm thinking, how do we build a national organization for young people? And it was really hard because all of us are going to school full time and trying to do as best as we can. And all of us are doing the side jobs to pay for our bills and to pay for our tuition and to help our parents out. So I was selling Avon.
I love that.
I was taking care of babies, doing my babysitting. I was cleaning homes with my mom while I was also going to school full time. While I was also trying to figure out how do we create an organization. Now, none of us had started an organization, but we had the dreams, and I also will say the entrepreneurial spirit.
Yes.
To say it doesn't exist, there's an opportunity here, and we want to try it out. And even though the organization did not mean that it will sustain our lives financially. And I speak for myself, Nelly. For me, it became my purpose. This is my purpose on earth. This is the role that I need to play. And even though I knew that there was not going to be a job for me because I was also undocumented, so how could I work? I knew that I had to do all the sacrifices that I could to be able to build the organization along with my colleagues and also pay the bills.
And learn how to fundraise and learn how to, it was such a big learning curve. Now, let's take a little pivot here because in the middle of all this, you had a tragic thing happen to you.
Oh, yes.
Yeah. So let's talk about what happened and how it affected your advocacy.
It was a big turning point in my life, and Walter's life as well. We have been struggling, as I said, like sometimes we didn't even have money to buy lunch. So I remember going to the McDonald's when they used to have their dollar menu. Sometimes that would be lunch for us because we were full-time students at the same time that we were trying to build United We Dream and doing all these side jobs where we could get paid cash to be able to sustain ourselves and to, help a little bit with our families. We had already started a relationship with Walter, more than friends. And he went to drop me off one night at home. And I grew up in Queens. And he lived in Long Island. And so he drops me off. And then he decides that he wants to stop by one of the famous cholados in Queens, in Jackson Heights, that it's a Colombian like fruit salad, for lack of a better way to describe it. And he always said, I don't have cholados in Long Island, so every time that I get a chance to have a cholado, I'm gonna do it. So after he drops me off, and this is 9 p.m., maybe close to 10 p.m. at night, he parks his car, he's walking to get a cholado, and he gets surrounded by gang members. And they start asking him for his wallet, for his phone. And, I remember him saying to me, all I saw in front of me were young people. that I love because I love young people. And I told them, you don't want to do this. Like, you don't really want to do this. Like, tell me that you need money for food, or like, what is it that you need? And I want to help you. But you don't want to steal from me. You're not bad people. And they ignored that conversation that he was trying to have. And you have multiple of them assaulting him physically. So Walter ends up on the street. He lost consciousness. And a taxi driver, it's passing by, driving by that corner. And he opens the door of his taxi and pulls Walter into the taxi. And this is how Walter gets saved from probably something much worse that could have threatened, his life. And this moment and this experience, we would have never thought that it will bring a blessing in the sky. Because what happened was that it had been gang members that had been going through a week of initiation. And so that meant that they had to attack, unfortunately, people in their communities. And Walter gets to be one of the only people that provided information to the police about what happened. And it was because he provided information. It was because the police was able to talk to him after he woke up that he was able to file for a U visa, which is given to folks who are survivors of domestic violence or survivors of, assaults like the one that he went through. Now, he calls me up when he, gained consciousness, and I ran to see, he was just a few blocks away from where I lived. And this is where now it became both of us who were going through this experience together. And I was just so grateful that he was alive, but also so disturbed by the whole experience. And, who would have thought that this experience was going to lead to then him and I being able to get a U visa, which gave us the opportunity to move from being undocumented to gaining a work permit. And then from a work permit, get to a green card eventually. And just a few days ago, I just submitted my application for citizenship.
Wow. That's amazing.
Almost a decade in the making.
Let's now go back to you are now running this organization, and you decide that, you really decide that what you're going to focus on is DACA. And let's talk about the inception of DACA and how that came to be. And really, what does your organization look like? Because I think we have to paint a picture that you're in Washington, D.C., you have X amount of people, but you have all these people around the country connected through social media that you can engage. So talk a little bit about that, and then how did you all single-handedly really stick to the plan to make DACA happen?
We at United We Dream, the power really comes from all of our members that are all over the country. As we say, it's bottom up, it's grassroots. So in our leadership, my board of directors, our leadership committee are all representatives, local leaders from all different groups that we have across the country. And when we were talking about what is the political strategy to make sure that the DREAM Act becomes a reality. This was, I'm talking about 2009, 2010. We pushed Congress to vote on the DREAM Act in 2010, and I feel like maybe the mainstream media gave us a highlight for the first time that year, because we mobilized hundreds of young people who took over the Capitol, who fasted, who marched, and all of a sudden people are saying, who are these young people that are not leaving DC and it's close to Christmas and are in the cold marching and talking to members of Congress and risking arrest and taking over offices so that this bill can pass? The bill fell short by 5 votes in 2010. And just to show you that this is, that the challenges with the politics about this conversation is that it was also Democrats. This bill failed because 5 Democrats did not vote with us.
So like we have
5
these images of like
votes
Democrats and
short.
Republicans, and you've talked to me about this, that I think we are as people just watching TV very unsophisticated in understanding that what people say and what people do are not the same thing. And maybe people declare themselves Democrat and that conjures up an image for us, but that doesn't mean they actually believe that or follow through on that.
Or are doing what they said that they will do.
Right.
So many Democrats may have the right talking points, but then in Congress, they were not voting with us. And when you are a member of Congress, you could tell me all that you want. You can tweet all that you want. But if your votes
Show
are
the
not a
opposite.
reflection of what you're saying or you're tweeting about, then you're not real.
But I think that's like I think what I've heard you say is that's like an art form, that people have like a press persona, right? That it's what they want people to see, and then their actions may or may not be the same.
No.
And the same by Republicans. They might say,
Oh,
I don't believe
absolutely.
in this, I don't believe in that, but then they vote for you.
It goes for both parties, which is why early on for us, we said this is less about who is a Democrat and who is a Republican. If you put the labels aside, this is really about what you're saying. Is that reflective in how you vote? Is that reflective of how you are organizing your other members of Congress to push for something? And that became really the measure for us and the accountability. And so when we were coming out of a painful vote in 2010, and I remember all of us gather in the chamber of Congress crying because we have worked so hard to push this bill to the finish line. We said, this moment is going to make our movement stronger. And when we came together in Memphis, Tennessee. And there were veterans of the civil rights movement that came to talk to us, to share stories about how many of their friends in the civil rights movement were killed, that they organized, that they went to Washington, D.C., that they never stopped. And so they gave us a lot of hope about what we needed to do in that moment. But then it became a question about strategy. So did we keep pushing for the DREAM Act and try to push a Congress that was not going to move into action? There was gridlock in Congress. So then we said, look at Obama. President Obama had run on an agenda to say that he wanted to make sure that we had immigration reforms that will allow people to live without the fear of deportation, a pathway to citizenship, that he will help undocumented young people with the DREAM Act. Those were all public commitments that he made in all of his speeches. So we said, there's something here. He may have the power to stop this. So if Congress will not move, we will push the president on this. And we came up with this idea that other advocacy groups have been talking about, particularly groups that have been working with immigrants that have been criminalized by the criminal justice system. And they share with us an idea, this group called Families for Freedom. They share with us this idea that there could be a deferred action process, which meant that you will defer the deportation of some people and give them protection from deportation by giving them a work permit. And this gets very wonky in like the immigration law conversation. But what we understood is that there was an opportunity to push the president to do something. Many of us disagree. The establishment in the parties disagree with us. The establishment in the advocacy community disagree with us. They said, that will never be possible. You're crazy. You're out of your mind. And many people said to us, why would you bother our friend? President Obama is our friend. He's our ally. You cannot go against him and ask him to do this. This is wrong. This is not smart. Many people call us naive. The naive young people. But we said, we believe that we are onto something. We were sophisticated strategists by this point. And more than anything, we are the experts in our own lives. So we were going to push this. And we had learned so much about how democracy works at this point that we said, we've been through this game before. We've been played by Republicans. We've been played by Democrats. We're not going to be played anymore. So this is when we launched a campaign that we call the Right to Dream. And that's what leads to the Deferred Action for Childhood Arrivals program that was passed in 2012 by President Obama, despite the fact that many people said to us, that will never happen. Despite the fact that many people said, that's not a smart strategy, that's naive, it's impossible. What our movement showed after sharing our stories, after sitting in members of Congress offices until they give us an answer, that we did through marching, through fasting, through direct action and civil disobedience, it's that when we moved our strategy, when we were putting our words into action, and when we were putting the pressure and holding those accountable in power, that we will be able to win. And that's what we did. And we won. And we made the impossible possible in 2012 when DACA happens. And I will never forget, I was in Los Angeles, and we were getting ready to have a street that we were going to shut down in downtown LA to put pressure on President Obama to pass DACA. And the night before we were supposed to do that, I get a call from our DC office, our Washington DC office, who tells me, the president is going to announce this program tomorrow. We've won.
Wow.
And
it's possible.
I just could not believe it. And I could just think of my brother who was going to benefit from this, from all of my friends that were going to benefit from this. And that after more than 10 years of working, we were winning in a major and historical way. Because this is after 30 years that we had not seen a positive change in immigration.
It was an incredible moment, I remember. And I also remember that then you went right back to work because you had to train everybody on what DACA meant, right? So you had to take another shift. What has happened now that we are in a completely different presidency with Donald Trump? How has your organization shifted? How has it changed everything in this country again? Which tells you that you can't stop, that you can't sort of think, oh, it's easy street now. Talk about that.
This is what I was saying, when it becomes a calling and you understand that it's much bigger than yourself and it's much bigger than sometimes my own personal experience. Because when you start talking to young people from Connecticut with our group of Connecticut Students for a Dream, over the young people that live in the border areas like the New Mexico Dream Team, or you speak with people that live in El Paso, Texas, when you talk to all of them, you will find that their experiences are shaped not just because of immigration status. All of these families and all of these young people are having issues and challenges and obstacles going to college, finding jobs, even when they have immigration status, working, living without fear. They're being racially profiled by police. We have one story of a young student, Dennis, in high school, who went to the office to report that he was being bullied. And his high school in Houston, instead of helping him, called the police on him. And the police in Houston then called ICE on him because he had an accent. And as a senior student in high school, Dennis ends up in a jail for 3 months because he went to report bullying. Now, our efforts got him out of detention, and now he is graduated from high school, thinking about going to college. But where we are now, it's a very difficult moment because what we have seen is that things have gotten worse. When we see political leaders, even from the White House itself, who are calling for hate, who are calling for agendas of mass deportation and deporting people like me and my family. And sometimes people think that may debilitate our movement. And what I'm always happy to share with people is that even though they want us to be deported, and even though they are attacking and targeting our communities so much through how they talk, through their policies, every day you see something, from children in cages to families being separated to folks seeking refuge at the border being tear gas, right? Like, the news are terrible. But when I travel all across the country, young people in different organizations that are part of United We Dream are saying, We are here to fight so that we can live without fear and so that our families can thrive. And I'm going to keep sharing my story, and I'm going to keep advocating, and I'm going to keep traveling to Washington, D.C. And many of them are changing the power dynamic in their home states. We just celebrated huge victories in places like Connecticut, where students, after 5 years of asking for their state to help undocumented students pay for their college tuition, they won. We just celebrated a victory in Austin, Texas, where the city said, this is going to be a safe city for immigrants. We're not going to ask people for their papers. Our police is not going to collaborate with ICE. So these are all of the victories that we're seeing.
You've seen in a 10-year period that the work really does work.
Absolutely.
And that it swings, right? It goes back and forth. Change doesn't happen linearly in a way, right? It just goes forward, then people get scared and it goes backward. But the option is to do nothing, or the option is to get past your fears and join and be part of something greater than yourself. I mean, that's what when I have been around you and your organization, I have felt empowered, and I'm an empowered person, but I have felt even more empowered because I realized, no, we have to, if you love your country, and this is what I get from your congresos, like that you guys are very patriotic. If you love your country, you don't accept the status quo. You learn, you become part of it, you infiltrate it, you change it, you move it, you get disappointed, but you keep being in it with it.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's, so much of what we learn about this country, even the reason why my parents came, is because what do people say about the United States? Is the country of freedom? Is the country of justice? Is the country of opportunity? You will pursue your dreams. You work hard. You achieve your dreams, right? Like everybody knows that. Everybody around the world hears that. And then when you get here, you realize that it's actually quite different. That all of these values and these dreams that people talk about this country are not 100% true. So the way that I see the work that I do and the work that young people do in United We Dream is to say, we agree with those values. Those values were actually the driving force for our families to be here. And now that we are living here and we realize that that has yet to be achieved, we want to be part of the effort so that this country actually achieves those values that are spoken about, of freedom for everybody, not just for white men, not just for certain groups of people. And that all of us, and I'm talking about Black people, women, LGBTQ people, our Muslim communities, we are a multiracial, multi-ethnic country. And so my dream, and the dream that we have at United We Dream, is that all of us, regardless of who you are or where you come from, that you can live without fear, that you can thrive, that you can achieve your dreams. And so that's why we do the work that we do.
Okay, I want to switch a little bit and talk about you, because you have sacrificed a lot. And, I always say that no one really understands that immigrants and immigrant kids are the most empathetic people in the world because we've walked in the shoes of our parents. You've given up a lot in your life to do this work. And this year, you've had a magical number of things happen. So you just won the MacArthur Genius Award, which, can you explain to people listening and watching, what is the MacArthur Genius Award and why is it such an incredible, prestigious gift? And how does that make you feel? And I know that you have been, as much as you've had difficulty and that you have all experienced difficulty, you've also met magical people like Josh and like rich people that have given money to the cause that nobody would even know that they're, Let's talk about all the positive things that have come out of this for you.
Yeah.
And what does your future look like? Because you have radically changed yourself in this process.
Absolutely. I mean, this whole process has transformed me completely. And there's nothing that will change about it. Sometimes people say being undocumented is really painful and it's terrible. It breaks you down in so many ways. All of that is true. And at the same time, I wouldn't have it any other way, because it was my undocumented experience as an immigrant, as a woman in this country, as a person of color in this country, that I found my purpose.
And your pain is your brand.
As you say in your book. As you say in
And
your
it
book.
is true.
And it is so true. And it is that transformation of being able to move from a place of pain to hope. It is that transformation.
And power.
And power.
And that you can turn pain into power.
Into power. And that's, you know, that's what we do at United We Dream. And I think that that's why you enjoy our Congreso so much.
I love it.
Because it was moving young people from a place of shame and fear into finding their voice, into power, into feeling agency and visibility for the first time. So for me, I wouldn't have it any other way because I found my purpose. And it's never been about the money for me. I've struggled all my life. And my family, you know, still lives in the very small 600 square feet studio in the immigrant neighborhood of Jackson Heights, where I grew up, where it was 4 of us in a mini place, a studio. And my parents are still undocumented. And my brother has DACA, and I'm the only person that has papers in the household. And there's a lot of responsibility and also joy that I can help my family out. So this work was never really about, you know, a lot of people sometimes make career choices because they say, like, you know, become a lawyer because that's where the money is at. Or become a business major because that's where the money is at. I never thought about it that way. So my experience, and that painful experience, really helped me to find purpose. And I think that because I found my purpose, and I didn't care if I didn't have money, I didn't care that I was struggling. And, you know, many members in my family always say, you're crazy. You could open a business and make money even if you're undocumented, they kept telling me, some of them. But I said to them, there's something here. This is giving me meaning, and I'm bringing meaning and transformation to other people's lives. And that was so fulfilling for me. So I think that that magic and living in your purpose brings that karma or that energy around you.
It does bring miracles.
And it brings angels to your life. You know, you being one of them when I met you a few years ago, and hearing your story as a Cuban American who also went through the immigrant experience. And and look at you and look at what you've built. And so it's getting to know people like you, people like Sandra Cisneros, who's a famous writer, that I just have been feeling like this was the right thing to do for me. And so when I get this call in October of 2017, that I got the MacArthur Award. I could not believe it. You know, first of all, and I share this story with the MacArthur Foundation. I said, I thought you were calling me because you wanted to give money to my organization. And that's why I picked up the phone. Because I said, MacArthur wants to support us for our work. And I remember then the staff of MacArthur saying, are you in a private place? And then I said, okay, this is a little bit weird. Why are you asking me? And I said, well, yes, I'm in the living room of my apartment in Queens. And she said, well, I need you to not share this with anyone, but we want to congratulate you because you have been selected as a MacArthur Fellow. And I said, me? You know, the first thing that came to my mind is like, did they get this right? Do they know who they're calling? Do they know who I am? And like, I'm not an academic. I always thought that the MacArthur Fellowship was for professors that have, you know, scientists that had discovered, you know, great things in this world. And so when they called me, it was really hard to believe because this fellowship is a recognition of what they called creativity, passion, leadership, innovation. And the fellowship is an award. It's a financial award of a little bit over $600,000. And they're saying, this is for you. This is for you to continue on your projects, to continue to innovate, or just so that you don't have to worry about surviving. And only for me, I'm still adjusting to having a feeling of safety or relief, that there's this money, you know, that they give you gradually over a period of 5 years. So it's not like they give you the check right there. But it brings a sense of safety that I'm not used to. And there's also now a voice, and I have friends who've told me this, you don't have to hustle anymore.
Well, it's more than that. It's also like the universe saying, you did good.
Yeah.
You did good. And that we think that we're alone and we're not.
No. No, because I know that there were angels and people around me who thought about my name when they brought it up to the committee at the MacArthur Foundation. And because how else would they know about me? This is what I was so surprised about. So for me, this meant a recognition, not only for me, even though I own it. Yes, I played a leadership role in this work. I've sacrificed a lot. I've learned a lot. I have put myself out there at the risk of being attacked. So I recognize my leadership role. But what I felt it was also important, especially in the political and the social moment that we're in, where people are scapegoating immigrants from different places and institutions, that this recognition recognized my community. This award recognized my immigrant undocumented community. People like my parents, other young people that are part of United We Dream, who have gone through a similar journey. And it recognizes our lives and our dreams and our effort, and that we are changing this country for the better. So for me, it was an amazing and beautiful opportunity to say, look, we are being recognized. Yes, it's about me, but it's our community that is being recognized. So it was a really deep moment for me, for my family, and translating this to my family.
¿Qué es eso?
Eso es una beca. Like, do you have to pay it back? Well, my mom thought that I would have to register to go to college again, because she thought that it was only based on a study program. So I had to do the cultural translation because there's such a cultural significance. And a friend of mine said to me, you don't understand, in this country, this fellowship gives people so much credibility. And now you can knock on doors that you may have not knocked on before. And, this gets to connecting with other magical people who share dreams and share values and who have resources and have said, here, we're going to financially support your work.
So let's send a message to the women listening. If you sit home and do nothing, whether it's entrepreneurship, whether it's advocacy, nothing will happen. If you shift your life ever so slightly and start thinking about something greater than yourself, whether it's your kid, whether it's your marriage, whether it's your pain that you transform into a transcendent piece of work, what is possible? I think I want to hear from you what you would say to Latinas about this moment in time and what you want. And, you talked about we have to find our voice.
Yes.
This year has been an unbelievable year in Latinas speaking up. Probably none of them thought they were going to do it, and they did it.
Yes.
What do you say about that in closing?
My message to Latinas is, hermanas, you are powerful beyond measure. And we need you. We need you to work for our communities. We need you to join in not only painting a vision of this country that it includes us and our families and our kids and our communities, but that also we are part of the leadership of that. We need you to help us to transform organizations, and you have it in you. You have the experience, you have the journey and the wisdom of our ancestors that have done so much for us. And I think of even living heroes like Dolores Huerta.
Yes.
Who have been fighting for working families, for farm worker communities, for our community for so many years. So we're not going to be able to do this if we remain quiet. We're not going to be able to do this if we remain isolated or with fear. So my invitation to my hermanas is, let's share our stories, let's speak up together, and let's transform communities together. If we unleash our Latina magic, we can transform this country. And we're already doing it, because when I look at you, when I look at myself, when I look at the other young Latinas that work with me, we are transforming communities across the country. But we need more. And if we have more of us, imagine what we can do.